Japan has an insanely wide variety of railways, and thanks to the efforts of a developer called Union Workshop, we have a small yet reasonable selection of Japanese routes in Train Simulator, but the one we're looking at today is at the opposite end of the spectrum from the likes of the Yamanote line in Tokyo. Joe. Instead, we're looking at the quaint Hidaka Mainline, and I apologise for any incorrect pronunciations as I am not familiar with the Japanese language. This add-on was released in October 2017 and costs $24.79 NZD at the normal price. You get a 51.3 kilometre long route from Tomakomai to Hidaka-Mombetsu on the island of Hokkaido, with a mere 8 stations on this section. The stations in question are Tomakomai, Yofutsu, Hama-Atsuma, Hama-Taura, Mukawa, Shiomi, Tomikawa, and Hidaka-Mombetsu. This is only a short section of a line that used to continue for a total length of 146.5 kilometres. In my opinion, Hidaka-Mombetsu feels like a strange place to cut the route coverage because it is a through station with very basic facilities, with the track continuing past the station and down the coast to the line's actual terminus of Samani. But there's a very good reason why the line was cut so short. The Hidaka Mainline is a rural route that used to run from Tomakomai to Samani, the former being an interchange with the electrified Chitose and Muroran main lines. The first section opened in 1913 as a 2-foot 6-inch gauge line, eventually being converted to 3-foot 6-inch gauge between 1929 and 1931. Many years later, diesel railcars had become the main motive power on this quiet line, but a storm in January 2015 severed the line between Atsuga and Okaribe. A typhoon in September of that year caused even more damage to the line, and since then, replacement buses have operated between Mukawa and Samani, with this section of the railway not being officially closed until April 2021. The reason for the replacement buses was due to passenger numbers being deemed too low for running trains again. Apparently, trains can still run onto the Hidaka Mainline from Tomakomai, but only as far as Mukawa. The current services only call it Yofutsu and Hama-Atsuma, because Hama-Taura station closed in March 2023. This was due to low passenger numbers averaging single digits per day. I suspect the route in Train Simulator is meant to take place sometime between January and September 2015, but that makes the decision to include a certain railcar quite confusing. On the motive power scene, this route only includes the Kiha 130 diesel railcar, which means the electrified section through Tomakomai looks unrealistically desolate. I've tried to use the 103 and 105 series EMUs from the Wakayama and Sakurai lines add-on as AI traffic through this station, to at least make it look busy, but these units don't run here in real life. Turning back to the Kiha 130, and during my research on this thing I found out that 11 of these things were built in 1988 and 1989, designed as a low-cost and lightweight diesel railcar for rural lines. They were based at the yard in Tomakomai and exclusively ran on the Hidaka main line, and while they did speed up travel on the line, their body structure was poorly suited to the climate in this area. An individual railcar only weighed around 28 metric tons, and they didn't fare too well in level crossing accidents, 2 of which took place in 1991 and 1996 respectively. Railcar number 5 was involved in that 1996 accident, becoming the first of her class to be withdrawn as she was damaged beyond repair. Ironically, the Kiha 130s were replaced by the very same railcar class that was meant to be replaced by the 130s. In other words, the Kiha 40 returned to the line in the early 2000s, with the last of the 130s being retired in June 2001. The 11-strong class was scrapped over the next 8 years, with none surviving into preservation. One of the good things about Train Simulator is that it allows people to revisit motive power that no longer exists in real life. In Train Simulator, the Kiha 130 is supplied in a basic white livery with 1 green and 2 little blue stripes, which is an accurate recreation of their real livery, albeit without any branding. And there's something I find confusing about this add-on. Why is the Kiha 130 included when this class was only in service from 1988 to 2001, long before the storm damage in 2015? Incidentally, the Kiha 40 is now in Train Simulator as well, having been included as part of the Tadami Line add-on, released in July 2020. But the Hidaka Mainline used the Kiha 40-350 variant, which differed from the Kiha 40-500 that comes with the Tadami line. The most obvious difference that I noticed was the smaller windows on the Kiha 40-350s, and although it's not fully authentic, I suppose you could still run the Tadami line's Kiha 40s out of Tomakomai. After all, it's better than no Kiha 40s at all. For the longest time, I had avoided getting the Tadami line because of its rather high price, 50 New Zealand dollars. But quite by chance, I was making this review in the same week that Union Workshop's add-ons were on a discount, and I managed to get the Tadami line at 55% off. As a result, it only cost me $22.49, while the Hidaka Mainline is only $11.15 during the sale. For future reference, this sale ended on October 24. There is a manual supplied with this add-on, giving you instructions on how to drive the Kiha 130, as well as an explanation on how the automatic train stop safety system works. But I had a harder time trying to read the manual because, although it's in English, the translation is very poor. I don't know where Union Workshop is based, but I'm guessing they're Japanese. Either way, I could tell that English is not their first language, in which case it's understandable why the translation in the manual wasn't very good. The Kiha 130's model looks fairly basic at first glance, but A, it's better than anything I could ever make, and B, there are still some noteworthy details that I like. These include the animated fans in the passenger saloon, presumably to compensate for the railcar's lack of air conditioning, as well as what I think is meant to be the builder's plate and technical information just next to the driver's doors, although I can't understand what those symbols mean. Overall, and in my opinion, the Kiha 130 doesn't look too bad. She's a fairly conventional diesel railcar, but I noticed one strange feature just next to the driver's seat. I think this is a ticket machine, or something of that nature, but please correct me if I'm wrong. As for the sounds, I have no idea on whether or not they're accurate, and I can't decide whether they're mediocre or outright bad. The engine sound is very scratchy, especially when it's set at full power, and the horn is just this strange little squeak. As far as I can tell, most of these sounds are not reused from the Kiha 07 that comes with the Story of Forest Rail. Mind you, that is a much older railcar than the 130. Confusingly, this thing is referred to as the Kiha 750 in-game, but I can't find any evidence of the real things ever using that designation. Going back to the 130, I found the driving experience to be fairly basic, with the only real challenge being the addition of a gear lever and trying to work with said lever if you're unfamiliar with this railcar. As if to add to the lightweight feel of this unit, even the sounds and movement of the throttle and brake levers make them feel as light as a feather. The throttle has 5 notches, but it's quite sensitive to keyboard inputs, while the brake lever doesn't feel as sensitive by comparison. It takes around 52 or 55 minutes to complete a full run from Tomakomai to Hidaka-Mombetsu while calling at all intermediate stations. The maximum permitted speed on this line is 80 km per hour, and the driving experience is relatively easy, especially since there aren't any serious inclines to contend with. The platforms are very short at most of the stations, but the Kiha 130's strong brakes means it's unlikely that you'll overshoot the platform. I found that the Kiha 130 will happily cruise along at 79.2 km per hour if you keep the throttle on notch 2, but this doesn't really work on a downhill gradient. The line is mostly level, with the steepest gradient I noticed only being the 1 in 100 at either end of the bridge across the Atsuma River, just north of Hama-Atsuma Station. The way Union Workshop did the scenery on this route is somewhat strange, although it's largely the same as other UW routes. The detail is fairly basic, and it doesn't extend too far away from the track, although I suspect this was done to improve performance. But in saying that, the frame rate can vary wildly depending on whether you're looking straight down the track or off to the sides. Some areas have especially basic scenery, such as the roads on either side of Tomakomai Depot. To be honest, other details are so basic that it makes the route look older than it actually is, and it often takes me out of the immersion. But the good thing is that it's not as bad as the scenery on the Shanghai Maglev route, which, in my opinion, is one of the worst routes in the whole game. There's an odd combination of custom assets, presumably modelled by UW themselves, with reused Kuju-era assets dotted about all over the place. Examples include the car park asset that's copied and pasted a few times near Tomakomai Station, these allotments just south of Yofutsu, at least I think they're meant to be allotments, as well as the industrial buildings near Hama-Atsuma and these 2 warehouses at Mukawa. On a positive side, I think the station models are fine, although the model of Tomakomai Station is fairly basic without much detail on the platforms, and none in the concourse above the tracks. Even then, the in-game model still looks enough like its real-life counterpart to avoid absolutely ruining the immersion. The station building at Yofutsu is accurate to the real thing, which is good to see. But the colours are different, and there isn't really any detail between the station and a nearby road. I was confused and amused to see the body of an old passenger coach at Hama-Atsuma, and I thought this was meant to be used as a station building, although there are minimal details inside. If anyone knows why this old coach body is at Hama-Atsuma Station, please tell us in the comments section below this video, as opposed to the comments section with Brett Cooper. Hama Taura looks like the Japanese equivalent of Burney Arms, albeit with a road running nearby. It looks like there's no facilities at this station, and it's in such a remote area that I wasn't surprised to hear of the real station's closure. There's a slight mistake on the station sign, where it says Hama-Atsuma instead of Hama Taura. The model of Mukawa Station looks very good, as far as I'm concerned. It is fairly accurate to the real thing, complete with these staggered platforms and a detailed waiting room. Unfortunately, the next room over has no detail in it, and neither does the car park right outside the station. Besides the station and crossing loop, there is also a small yard here, but I don't know why. Shiomi Station looks just as basic as Hamataura, albeit with a rudimentary shelter on the platform. To me, this whole route is like the embodiment of a basic railway that still serves as a vital lifeline for rural communities. Tomikawa Station is another one located in a reasonably built-up area, but, of course, it's nowhere near as built up as Tokyo or Osaka. I like this station model just as much as Mukawa, but the immersion is slightly spoiled by the lack of detail between the station and road. And now we are at Hidaka-Mombetsu, the final station on this truncated section of the Hidaka Mainline. This one is also in a town, complete with another reasonably well-modelled station building and island platform, although I personally think it looks a little odd with the little path and foot crossing as the only means of accessing the platform. There's some details in the building itself, but it's only a couple of benches, one vending machine and lights hanging from the ceiling. There is no detail in what I assume would be the ticket office. Although the scenery quality is inconsistent, and the reused Kuju-era assets are quite a visual distraction, there's still a few things that I like about this route besides the station modelling and the experience of driving the Kiha 130. For instance, I like the ambient bird chirping noises that you can hear throughout the route. There's also an accurate, or at least suitable, bell sound at the level crossings. From what I've seen in real pictures and footage, Japanese crossings typically have these black and yellow markings on the posts, lights, and barriers, all complemented by a low-pitched ringing from the bells. While the experience and one's enjoyment of this route is somewhat hindered by the limited service variation, basic scenery, and inclusion of only one form of motive power, I still recommend the Hidaka Mainline. It's not too expensive, especially when compared to the Tadami line, and it's ideal for those who just want to potter about on a relaxing line running along or near the coast. Not to mention fans of obscure diesel railcars and the lesser known lines of Japan.